The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing the world in a silence so complete, it felt like nature itself had given up on making noise. I stood at the threshold of what used to be my grandmother's house, a structure so dilapidated that calling it a house felt generous. The roof sagged in the middle like a broken promise. Windows were shattered or missing entirely, and the front door hung on a single hinge, creaking with each gust of wind that tore through the Colorado mountains. I was 24 years old, 8 months pregnant, and had exactly $47 in my pocket. My breath crystallized in the air as I stepped inside, my boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The interior was worse than I'd imagined. Water damage had turned the walls black with mold. The floorboards were rotted through in places, and snow had drifted in through the broken windows, creating small mountains of white in what used to be the living room. The smell hit me immediately: damp wood, decay, and the sharp bite of frozen air that hadn't been disturbed in years. This was it. This was all I had left. My parents had disowned me when they found out about the pregnancy. My boyfriend, the father, had disappeared the moment I told him, taking with him not just his promises, but also the $3,000 I'd saved from working double shifts at the diner. My friends had slowly drifted away, their sympathy exhausted by my seemingly endless string of bad decisions. Even my landlord had finally lost patience, changing the locks while I was at work and leaving my belongings in garbage bags on the sidewalk. The only thing my grandmother had left me was this ruin in the mountains, 40 miles from the nearest town. I placed my hand on my swollen belly, feeling the baby kick against my palm. "It's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to the baby or myself. "We'll figure it out." The first night, I slept in my car in the driveway, wrapped in every piece of clothing I owned, the engine running in intervals to keep from freezing. The second day, I started cleaning. I had no tools, no supplies, no money, but I had time and desperation, which turned out to be a surprisingly effective combination. I spent the first week just making one room habitable, using cardboard from boxes I found in the attic and duct tape I'd shoplifted from the hardware store in town. I covered the broken windows. I swept out the debris, scrubbed the floors with snow and the last of my dish soap, and managed to get the ancient wood stove in the corner working with branches I collected from the forest. The isolation was profound. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the mountain, and the road leading to the house became impassable when the snow got heavy, which was often. Some days I didn't see another human being. I rationed the food I had: crackers, canned soup, rice, and melted snow for water. At night, I lay on the floor beside the wood stove, my coat bundled under my head as a pillow, and listened to the wind howl through the gaps in the walls. I should have been terrified. I should have been crying. But somewhere between scrubbing mold off walls and patching holes with frozen mud, I found something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. 3 weeks into my isolation, I made my weekly trip to town. The drive down the mountain was treacherous, the road a sheet of ice beneath fresh snow. But I needed supplies. With the $20 I'd earned from selling my laptop to a pawn shop, I could buy enough rice and beans to last another 2 weeks if I was careful. The town of Silver Ridge was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and newcomers were regarded with suspicion. I kept my head down as I walked through the grocery store, loading my basket with the cheapest items I could find. My coat, too thin for the mountain winter, was buttoned tight over my pregnant belly, but I knew people stared. I could feel their judgment like a physical weight. I was in the canned goods aisle when I felt it. A sudden, sharp pain that radiated from my lower back around to my abdomen. I gasped, dropping the can I'd been holding. It clattered to the floor, rolling away as another wave of pain hit me. Too early. It was too early. I still had 4 weeks until my due date. "Miss, are you all right?" I looked up through tears I hadn't realized were falling. A store employee, maybe 17 years old, was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice came out as a whimper. Just a cramp." But it wasn't just a cramp. As I tried to straighten up, my vision swam, and I felt wetness between my legs. "Please, no. Not here. Not now. I think we should call someone," the boy said, his voice rising in pitch. "You don't look." "I said I'm fine," I snapped, louder than I intended. The pain was making me irrational. I needed to get out of here, get back to the house, figure this out on my own. That's what I did. I figured things out on my own. I abandoned the basket and stumbled toward the exit, one hand pressed against the small of my back, the other clutching my belly. The automatic doors seemed to take forever to open. The cold air hit me like a slap, and I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. My car was parked at the far end of the lot. It might as well have been a mile away. I made it 3 steps before another contraction hit, this one so intense that my legs buckled. I caught myself on the hood of a nearby vehicle, my palms slapping against cold metal. Through the haze of pain, I registered absently that it was a black SUV, sleek, expensive, completely out of place in this small mountain town. Easy. The voice came from behind me, low and measured. A hand touched my elbow, steadying me, and I caught a scent that cut through the pain. Expensive cologne, leather, and something else. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up in instinctive warning. I turned my head and found myself looking up at a man who seemed to exist in a different reality from the rest of Silver Ridge. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair styled with precision, and a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold symmetry. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. They were dark, almost black, and they assessed me with an intensity that felt invasive, like he could see not just my face, but everything beneath it. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, covered by a black wool overcoat that looked like it had never known a stain. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his Italian leather shoes to the watch on his wrist that caught the weak winter sunlight with an almost obscene gleam, and he was looking at me like I was something unexpected, something that had disrupted his carefully ordered world. "You need a hospital," he said. It wasn't a question. "I need..." Another contraction cut off my words, and I heard myself make a sound I didn't recognize, animal and desperate. His hand tightened on my elbow. "Marcus." He didn't raise his voice, but somehow a man appeared instantly beside him, tall, muscular, with the kind of watchful eyes that suggested he saw everything and forgot nothing. "Bring the car to the emergency entrance. Now." "Sir, now." The man, Marcus, didn't argue. He simply moved, disappearing around the SUV with practiced efficiency. "I can't afford..." I started, but the man cut me off. "That's not currently relevant." His other hand moved to my back, supporting me with a firmness that made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Can you walk?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone, that I didn't need help from a stranger, especially one who looked like he'd stepped out of a different world entirely. But another contraction was building, and I could feel something else now, a wetness, a pressure, a certainty that something was very, very wrong. "Something's wrong," I whispered, and I hated how my voice shook. "The baby. It's too early." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. "Then we move. Now." He didn't wait for my agreement. His arm wrapped around my waist, taking most of my weight, and he guided me forward with a confidence that suggested he'd moved unwilling people before. The SUV pulled up beside us, and Marcus leaped out to open the back door. "I don't even know you," I protested weakly, even as he was lifting me, actually lifting me, into the back seat. His hands were strong, controlled, and completely impersonal. "Dante Moretti," he said, sliding in beside me. He pulled the door shut, and Marcus was already accelerating before I could process what was happening. "And right now, that's all you need to know." The SUV moved through traffic with an urgency that should have been terrifying, but I was too focused on the pain, on the fear that something terrible was about to happen to my baby. I felt Dante's hand on my shoulder, steady, grounding, and heard his voice, low and commanding, speaking into a phone. "Dr. Chen, Dante Moretti, I'm bringing someone in. Pregnant, possibly premature labor, approximately 20 minutes out. Have a team ready." A pause. "I don't care what you have to cancel. Have a team ready." He ended the call, and I felt his attention return to me. "What's your name?" "Emma," I gasped. "Emma Hart, Emma." He said it like he was testing the weight of it, committing it to memory. "Stay with me, Emma. Keep breathing. We're almost there. I wanted to ask why he was doing this. Why a man who obviously had no connection to me, who had probably been on his way to something important, had stopped to help a pregnant stranger in a parking lot. But the pain was overwhelming everything else, and all I could do was focus on breathing, on staying conscious, on the strange comfort of his hand on my shoulder and his voice, cold, controlled, absolute, cutting through the chaos. "You're going to be fine," Dante Moretti said, and somehow, impossibly, I almost believed him. The hospital emerged from the snow like a beacon, and the SUV screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance. Doors were already opening, people rushing toward us with a gurney, and I felt myself being transferred from the vehicle to the gurney with practiced efficiency. "Emma Hart," Dante was saying to the doctor, an Asian woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, approximately 36 weeks pregnant. "Contractions started 20 minutes ago. She said something's wrong." "We've got her," Dr. Chen assured him, but I felt his hand tighten on mine for just a moment before releasing me. As they wheeled me through the doors, I turned my head and caught one last glimpse of him standing in the snow, surrounded by his men, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. And I realized with a sudden, instinctive certainty that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the predatory stillness in his posture. I had just made a terrible mistake. I should never have let him see me. The baby came in a rush of pain and terror, and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. They told me later that I'd been lucky, that if I'd waited even 30 minutes longer, if I'd tried to drive myself up that mountain road, both of us would have died. Placental abruption, they called it. The placenta had separated from my uterus, cutting off oxygen to the baby and causing me to hemorrhage internally. I woke up in a private room that was too quiet, too clean, too expensive. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and actual artwork hung on them, not the cheap prints you'd expect in a hospital, but real paintings. The window looked out over the snow-covered mountains, and weak afternoon sunlight filtered through blinds that actually worked. My hand went immediately to my stomach, now flat and empty, and panic seized my chest. "She's in the NICU." The voice came from the corner of the room, and I turned my head too quickly, sending a wave of dizziness through me. Dante Moretti sat in one of the chairs by the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, like he'd been watching me sleep. He still wore the same suit, though his tie was loosened now, and there was a tiredness around his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, small, but the doctors say she's a fighter. She. My voice came out as a croak, a girl. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. "They have her on oxygen and monitors, but Dr. Chen says her prognosis is good." I should have felt relief. I should have felt joy. Instead, all I felt was a crushing weight of questions. "Why are you still here?" He stood, moving with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with his size, and crossed to the side of my bed. Up close, in the soft light of the hospital room, I could see details I'd missed before. The faint scar along his jawline, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his eyes weren't quite black, but instead a very dark brown, like coffee without cream. "You collapsed in a parking lot," he said simply. "I brought you here. I wanted to make sure you were alive." "I am. So you can go." I tried to inject strength into my voice, but it came out weak, and we both knew it. "When was the last time you ate?" The question caught me off guard. This morning. Crackers. And before that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My body answered for me, too thin, too pale. The kind of malnourished that comes from weeks of rationing food you can't afford to replace. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus." He didn't raise his voice, but the door opened immediately, and the large man from earlier appeared. Food. Something substantial, but easy to digest. Soup, bread, fruit. "I can't pay for—" I started. "I didn't ask if you could pay." His voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was steel underneath it now. "You're recovering from surgery. You need to eat. That's not a negotiation." Marcus disappeared, and I was left staring at Dante Moretti, trying to understand what was happening. Men like him didn't help women like me. Men like him didn't sit in hospital rooms watching strangers sleep. Men like him certainly didn't order their... What? Bodyguards? Associates? To fetch soup. Why? I asked again. Why are you doing this? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from me to the window, where snow had started falling again. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, but somehow that made it more unsettling. My mother died in childbirth. My sister, half-sister, too. I was 7. He turned back to me, and there was something in his eyes now, something ancient and unhealed. So when I see a pregnant woman collapsing in the snow, I don't keep walking. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I didn't fully understand. Before I could respond, a nurse bustled in, middle-aged, efficient, with the kind of brisk cheerfulness that suggested she dealt with difficult situations daily. Oh, good, you're awake. She checked my IV, made notes on a tablet, and smiled at Dante like they were old friends. Mr. Moretti has been very insistent that you receive the best care. We've moved your daughter to a private NICU suite, and Dr. Chen will be by shortly to discuss your recovery. I didn't ask for... He did, the nurse said, cutting me off gently. And quite forcefully, I might add. Now, let's check your vitals. The next 20 minutes were a blur of temperature checks, blood pressure readings, and questions about my pain levels. Through it all, Dante remained in the corner, silent but present, like a shadow that had decided to take physical form. When the nurse finally left, Marcus returned with food, not hospital cafeteria food, but actual restaurant-quality soup in a real bowl, fresh bread that steamed when I broke it open, and fruit that looked like it had been picked that morning. Eat, Dante said, and it wasn't a request. I ate because I was starving, because my body was screaming for sustenance, and because some part of me, the part that had survived the last few months through sheer stubbornness, recognized that refusing would be pointless. He watched me eat with the same intensity he seemed to apply to everything, and I found myself becoming self-conscious about the way I tore into the bread, the way I didn't bother with manners or pacing. When I finally set down the spoon, my stomach fuller than it had been in weeks, he spoke again. The house on Mountain Ridge Road, that's where you're living? My blood went cold. How do you... Your car registration was in your purse. The hospital needed your information. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was perfectly normal to have gone through my belongings. That property has been abandoned for years. It's being renovated. I lied automatically. By whom? You? His eyes moved over me, assessing, calculating. You're alone up there. No electricity, no running water, no heat except a wood stove that's probably a fire hazard. In the middle of winter. 8 months pregnant. He paused. Was pregnant. That's none of your business. You made it my business when you collapsed against my car. His voice remained level, but there was something underneath it now, something that made my survival instincts scream a warning. Where's the father? Gone. Family? Gone. Friends? What do you think? I snapped, anger suddenly flooding through me. Yes, I'm alone. Yes, I'm broke. Yes, I've been living in a ruin on a mountain with no power and no help. Is that what you wanted to hear? Does it make you feel better about your good deed? You saved the pathetic charity case. Congratulations. Now you can leave with a clear conscience. Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. I immediately regretted the outburst. Not because it wasn't true, but because I'd learned the hard way that showing weakness, showing emotion, only gave people power over you. But Dante didn't look offended. If anything, he looked satisfied, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. You have fire, he said quietly. Good. You'll need it. Before I could ask what he meant, Dr. Chen entered, her expression professionally warm. Emma, how are you feeling? Like I just had emergency surgery, I said, aiming for humor and landing somewhere closer to exhaustion. She smiled. That's normal. You lost a significant amount of blood, and your body has been under extreme stress, not just from the abruption, but from malnutrition and exposure. We're going to keep you here for at least 5 days, possibly longer, depending on your recovery. 5 days? Panic seized my chest. I can't afford. Already taken care of, Dr. Aintiu, Chen said, glancing at Dante. Mr. Moretti has covered all medical expenses for both you and your daughter. I didn't agree to that, I protested, looking at him. I can't accept. You can, and you will. His voice cut through my protests like a knife. You almost died. Your daughter almost died. You're going to recover properly, and then we're going to discuss your living situation. There's nothing to discuss. I have a house. You have a death trap. He stood, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. Dr. Chen, I trust you'll keep me informed of any changes in their condition? Of course, Mr. Moretti. He moved toward the door, and I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. But he paused at the threshold, turning back to look at me with those unsettling dark eyes. Your daughter needs a name for the birth certificate, he said. Have you chosen one? I hadn't. I'd been so focused on survival, on just making it through each day, that I hadn't let myself think about names, about the future, about the reality of having another person dependent on me. Lily, I said suddenly, the name appearing in my mind fully formed. Her name is Lily. Something shifted in Dante's expression. So subtle I might have imagined it. Lily, he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. That was my mother's name, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with Dr. Chen and 1,000 questions I didn't know how to ask. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. I spent my time recovering, sleeping more than I had in months, eating regular meals that appeared like clockwork. Nurses came and went, always professional, always checking on me with a level of attention that felt excessive for a charity case. Dante didn't return, but his presence was everywhere. The private room, the flowers that appeared on the second day, white lilies that filled the space with their heavy scent, the medical bills that I wasn't allowed to see but knew must be astronomical, even the way the staff treated me, with a deference that suggested I was someone important, someone connected. On the 4th day, they finally let me see Lily. Dr. Chen wheeled me down to the NICU, and I felt my heart clench when I saw her, so tiny in her incubator, wires and tubes connected to her small body, her chest rising and falling with the assistance of machines. But her eyes were open, dark like mine, and when I slipped my hand through the opening and touched her tiny fingers, she gripped me with surprising strength. She's doing beautifully, the NICU nurse said. Another few days, and we can probably move her to room in with you. I sat there for hours, just watching her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over me like a physical thing. I had to figure this out. I had to find a way to provide for her, to keep her safe, to be the kind of mother who didn't let her daughter grow up in a freezing ruin on a mountain. But I had no money, no job, no prospects, and a house that was barely habitable even before I had a newborn to care for. I was so lost in my spiraling thoughts that I didn't notice the man approaching until he cleared his throat. Not Dante. This was someone different, older, maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested a life spent outdoors. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and he held a clipboard like it was a shield. Mrs. Hart? It's just Emma, and I'm not married. Emma, then. He shifted uncomfortably. My name is John Mitchell. I'm a contractor. Mr. Moretti hired me to assess the property on Mountain Ridge Road. My stomach dropped. He what? He asked me to inspect the structure, determine what repairs are needed, and provide an estimate. He handed me the clipboard, and I stared at the papers without seeing them. I've got to be honest with you. That house is in rough shape. The foundation is solid, which is good, but you've got extensive water damage, a roof that needs replacing, electrical that hasn't been updated since the 70s, and no functioning plumbing. I know what condition it's in, I said tightly. I'm the one living there. We're living there, he corrected gently. Mr. Moretti was very clear that you won't be returning until it's been properly renovated. Mr. Moretti doesn't get to make that decision. John Mitchell looked at me with something like pity. Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. When Dante Moretti tells me to renovate a house, I renovate the house. When he tells me to have it done in 3 weeks, I find a way to have it done in 3 weeks. And when he tells me that you're not to return until it's safe and habitable, I make damn sure you don't return until it's safe and habitable. I wanted to argue, I wanted to tell him that I didn't need Dante Moretti's help, that I could figure this out on my own, that I wasn't some damsel in distress who needed rescuing. But the words died in my throat because they would have been lies. I needed help. I needed it desperately. And somehow, impossibly, Dante Moretti had decided to provide it. The question was why? And more importantly, what would he expect in return? They released me from the hospital on the 6th day. Lily had to stay longer. Her lungs still needed support, and the doctors wanted to monitor her for another week at minimum. Leaving her behind felt like tearing out a piece of my own heart, but Dr. Chen assured me it was normal, that I could visit whenever I wanted, that she was in the best possible hands. What wasn't normal was the car waiting for me at the hospital entrance. The same black SUV. The same driver, Marcus, standing beside the open door like a sentinel. And sitting in the back seat, checking something on his phone with the kind of focused intensity that suggested empires rose and fell based on his decisions, was Dante Moretti. I stopped on the sidewalk, my discharge papers crumpling in my grip. "What are you doing here?" He looked up, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe that I'd question him. "Taking you home. I can take myself home. In what vehicle?" He gestured to the parking lot, where my ancient sedan sat covered in a week's worth of snow, ice frozen solid around the doors. "That car isn't going to start, and even if it did, you're in no condition to drive 40 miles up a mountain road in this weather." "Then I'll call a cab." "There are no cabs in Silver Ridge," he said it patiently, like explaining something to a child. "There's one Uber driver who covers the whole county, and he doesn't go up Mountain Ridge Road in winter. Get in the car, Emma." "Why do you care?" The question burst out of me, sharp and desperate. "Why are you doing all of this? The hospital bills, the renovations, I gestured helplessly at the SUV. At him. At the entire impossible situation. "What do you want from me?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying me with that same unsettling intensity. Then he climbed out of the car, moving with that predatory grace. And suddenly he was standing in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the fine lines around his eyes. "Get in the car," he repeated, softer this time. "We'll talk on the way." I should have refused. Every instinct I had screamed that getting in a car with this man, this stranger who had somehow inserted himself into my life with surgical precision, was a terrible idea. But I was exhausted, still recovering from surgery, and the cold was seeping through my thin coat like ice water. I got in the car. Marcus closed the door behind me, and Dante slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance that somehow felt more threatening than if he'd sat close. The interior was warm, luxurious, with leather seats that probably cost more than I'd made in a year at the diner. We pulled out of the parking lot in silence, the hospital disappearing behind us as Marcus navigated the snow-covered streets with practiced ease. I watched the town slide past the window, the same town where I'd collapsed just a week ago, though it felt like a lifetime. "My father," Dante said suddenly, breaking the silence, "built an empire through violence and fear. He believed the world was divided into two types of people, predators and prey. He taught me to be a predator." He turned to look at me, and there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. But my mother taught me something different. She taught me that strength without purpose is just brutality, that power without responsibility is tyranny. I don't understand what that has to do with me. "You remind me of her." The words were simple, but they landed like a physical blow, not in appearance. My mother was Italian, dark-haired, dark-eyed, but in spirit. She was alone when she came to this country. Pregnant. Abandoned by the man who promised to marry her. She survived through sheer will and stubbornness, working jobs that broke her body to provide for her son. He paused, his jaw tightening. She died because she was too proud to ask for help, because she waited too long to see a doctor when the labor started, trying to save money. By the time someone found her, it was too late. The story hung in the air between us, heavy with old grief and unspoken meaning. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Because what else could I say? I don't want your pity." His voice turned sharp. "I want you to understand why I'm helping you. It's not charity. It's not some good deed to make myself feel better. It's a debt I'm paying to a woman who's been dead for 27 years. We drove in silence after that, the SUV climbing higher into the mountains, the road becoming narrower and more treacherous. I watched the landscape change. Fewer houses, more trees, everything buried under snow that sparkled in the weak afternoon sun. When we finally turned onto Mountain Ridge Road, I felt my stomach tighten. The last time I'd seen my grandmother's house, it had been a wreck. I'd expected to return to the same ruin I'd left, just colder and emptier. Instead, I found transformation. The driveway had been plowed clean. The sagging roof had been replaced with new shingles that gleamed dark against the snow. The broken windows were whole, the front door hung straight and solid, and smoke rose from the chimney in a steady plume. What? I couldn't find words. 3 weeks, Dante said, watching my face. John Mitchell works fast when properly motivated. Marcus parked, and I climbed out on shaking legs, staring at the house like it might disappear if I looked away. The exterior had been painted, a warm cream color that made it look inviting instead of abandoned. The porch had been reinforced and cleared of debris, and a new railing ran along its length. The interior took more work, Dante said, coming to stand beside me. The electrical was completely redone. New plumbing throughout. The water damage was extensive, so most of the drywall had to be replaced. The floors were refinished where possible, and replaced where necessary. He walked toward the front door, and I followed in a daze. He opened it. It swung smoothly, no longer hanging on broken hinges, and gestured for me to enter. The warmth hit me first, real, consistent heat that came from radiators along the walls, not just a struggling wood stove. The living room that had been a disaster of rotted wood and mold was now clean and bright, with fresh white walls, refinished hardwood floors, and furniture that looked both comfortable and new. A couch, chairs, a coffee table, simple but solid. The kitchen is through here. Dante moved deeper into the house, and I trailed after him like a ghost. The kitchen had been completely gutted and rebuilt. New cabinets, new appliances, a refrigerator that hummed quietly in the corner. The countertops were butcher block, warm and practical. Upstairs, he continued, leading me upstairs that no longer creaked or sagged, are 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. I had them furnish the master bedroom and one of the smaller rooms as a nursery. The nursery. I stepped inside and felt tears sting my eyes. It was painted a soft yellow, with a crib against one wall, a changing table, a rocking chair by the window. There were stuffed animals on shelves, a mobile hanging above the crib with stars and moons, and curtains that would filter the harsh mountain light. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you do all this? Because you needed it. He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Because your daughter needed it. Because I could. I turned to face him, and for the first time since we'd met, I let myself really look at him, not as a stranger or a threat, but as the man who had somehow, inexplicably, saved my life. He stood in the doorway of the nursery, his expensive suit out of place in this simple mountain house, his dark eyes watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I can't pay you back, I said. Not for the hospital bills, not for the renovations, not for any of it. I have nothing. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different, lower, more careful. I want you to let me help. I want you to accept that you don't have to do this alone. I want... He stopped, his jaw tightening. I want to make sure you and Lily are safe. There was something in the way he said her name, my daughter's name, that made my chest tighten. Like it meant something to him, like she meant something to him, though he'd never even seen her except through an incubator wall. You don't know us, I said. You don't owe us anything, perhaps. He took a step closer, and I became acutely aware of how much larger he was than me, how his presence seemed to fill the room. Or perhaps I'm a selfish man who sees an opportunity to correct an old mistake, to save someone I couldn't save before. I'm not your mother. No. His eyes met mine, and there was heat there now, something that made my pulse quicken. You're not. But you're stubborn like she was, strong like she was, And you're drowning like she was, too proud to reach for a hand even when you're going under. I'm not drowning anymore. I gestured to the house around us. You made sure of that. Did I? He moved closer still, and I found myself backing up until my shoulders hit the wall beside the window. He didn't touch me, didn't crowd me, but his proximity was overwhelming. Or did I just give you a prettier place to drown in? Emma, you have no income, no job, no resources. This house is warm and safe now, but how will you feed yourself? How will you feed Lily? How will you pay for diapers, formula, clothes as she grows? How will you afford a car that actually runs when you need to take her to the doctor? Each question was a small knife, cutting away at the fragile hope I'd allowed myself to feel. I'll figure it out, I said, but my voice shook. I always do. You don't have to. Mom, his hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and his fingers touched my chin, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. His skin was warm, his touch gentle but firm. Let me help you. Really help you. Not just with the house, but with everything. Why? I asked again, desperate to understand. What do you get out of this? His thumb brushed across my lower lip, a touch so light I might have imagined it, but it sent electricity racing down my spine. Peace, he said quietly. A chance to sleep without seeing my mother's face. A chance to save someone before it's too late, instead of always being too late. I should have pulled away. I should have told him that I wasn't a charity project, that I didn't need saving, that whatever debt he thought he owed to his dead mother wasn't mine to help him pay, but I was so tired of fighting alone. So tired of pretending I was strong enough to handle everything by myself. What would that look like? I whispered. You helping me? You stay here. I make sure the house is maintained, that you have food, that Lily has everything she needs. In return, he paused, his eyes searching mine. In return, you let me visit. You let me be part of this. You don't shut me out. That's all? That's all. But there was something in his voice, something that suggested all was much more complicated than it sounded. A phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Dante stepped back, pulling the device from his pocket and glancing at the screen. His expression hardened, becoming the cold mask I'd seen in the hospital parking lot. I have to go. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back. Marcus will stay. He'll make sure you have everything you need tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss the details. Details? Of our arrangement. He said it like it was already decided, like my agreement was a foregone conclusion. Get some rest, Emma. You look exhausted. And then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs, the front door opening and closing with a solid thunk. I heard the SUV start, heard it crunch down the driveway, and then there was only silence and the soft hum of the heating system. I stood in the nursery for a long time, staring at the crib, at the mobile with its stars and moons, at the rocking chair where I would feed my daughter when she finally came home. The house was warm and safe and beautiful, everything I desperately needed and couldn't provide. But as I touched the place on my chin where Dante's fingers had been, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil. And the worst part was, I didn't care. Marcus turned out to be surprisingly good company, in the way that a well-trained guard dog might be good company. He didn't speak unless spoken to, positioned himself strategically where he could see both the front door and the driveway, and somehow produced a full meal from the newly stocked kitchen without ever appearing to actually cook. Mr. Moretti had groceries delivered this morning, he explained when I asked, setting a plate of pasta in front of me. He was specific about the inventory, said you'd need foods high in iron and protein for recovery. Of course he had been specific. Dante Moretti seemed to be specific about everything. I ate mechanically, my mind spinning. The house felt surreal, too perfect, too complete, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Every time I touched something, the smooth countertop, the soft towel in the bathroom, the thick comforter on the bed, I half expected it to dissolve, revealing the rot and decay underneath. But it didn't. It was real. All of it was real. That night, I lay in the master bedroom, in an actual bed with clean sheets and pillows that didn't smell like mildew, and stared at the ceiling. Through the window, I could see stars scattered across the black sky, clearer than I'd ever seen them. The house creaked occasionally as it settled, but these were the sounds of a solid structure, not a building on the verge of collapse. I should have felt grateful. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt trapped. The next morning, I woke to find Marcus already gone and a note on the kitchen counter in sharp, precise handwriting. Car will arrive at 10 a.m. Be ready, D. The car arrived exactly on time. Not the black SUV, but a sleek sedan driven by a different man, younger, with watchful eyes and the same military bearing as Marcus. He introduced himself as Tony and said nothing else during the drive back down the mountain. Dante was waiting in the hospital parking lot, leaning against his SUV with a phone pressed to his ear. He was arguing with someone in Italian. At least, I assumed it was Italian based on the rhythm and cadence, and his free hand gestured sharply as he spoke. When he saw me, he ended the call abruptly and slipped the phone into his pocket. Good morning. He looked me over with that assessing gaze, and I fought the urge to fidget. You look better. The rest helped. I slept in a real bed for the first time in months, I said. Of course it helped. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Come, Lily's waiting. We walked into the hospital together, and I became acutely aware of how people reacted to him. Nurses stepped aside without being asked. A doctor who was rushing down the hall stopped mid-stride to nod respectfully. Even the security guard at the entrance straightened his posture as we passed. Do you own this hospital? I asked as we rode the elevator up to the NICU. No. Then why does everyone act like you do? He glanced at me, and there was something dangerous in that look. A reminder that beneath the expensive suits and careful control was something much darker, because they know who I am, and they know what happens to people who displease me. The words should have frightened me. Instead, they sent a strange thrill down my spine that I absolutely did not want to examine. Lily had been moved to a private suite in the NICU, just as the nurse had mentioned. The room was warm and quiet, with a rocking chair and a small couch, and my daughter lay in her incubator looking stronger than she had just yesterday. Her color was better, the breathing tube had been removed, and she was awake, her dark eyes tracking movement with newborn curiosity. She's beautiful, Dante said quietly, coming to stand beside me. He stared at her with an intensity that made me uncomfortable, like he was memorizing every detail. She's small. She's a fighter, like her mother. He reached out slowly, tapping gently on the incubator, and Lily's tiny hand jerked toward the sound. Hello, Lily. I'm Dante. I'm going to make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. The words, the certainty with which he said them, made my throat tight. You can't promise that, can't I? He turned to look at me, and there was steel in his eyes. Watch me. Dr. Chen arrived shortly after, all professional smiles and good news. Lily was progressing well. If she continued improving, she could possibly come home in 3 to 5 days. There were instructions about feeding, about monitoring her breathing, about follow-up appointments that would need to be scheduled. Dante listened to everything with complete focus, asking questions I hadn't even thought of. How often should she eat? What signs should we watch for that might indicate problems? What temperature should the house be kept at? Who should we call in an emergency? We. He kept saying we, like it was already established that he would be part of this, part of Lily's life, part of my life. When Dr. Chen finally left, I turned to him. We need to talk about your arrangement. We do. He gestured to the couch, and I sat, feeling like I was about to negotiate a business deal I didn't understand. He settled into the chair across from me, his posture relaxed, but his attention absolute. I want to make sure you and Lily are taken care of. That means ensuring you have housing, food, medical care, and anything else you need. In exchange for what? In exchange for letting me be part of your lives. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his dark eyes locked on mine. I want to visit regularly. I want to watch Lily grow up. I want to know that I'm not too late this time. You barely know us. I know enough. His voice dropped lower. I know you're alone. I know you have no one to help you. I know that pride will make you refuse assistance until you're drowning again. And I know... He stopped, his jaw tightening. I know that if I walk away now, something will go wrong. You'll run out of money, or the car will break down in winter, or Lily will get sick, and you won't be able to afford treatment. and then I'll hear about it months later. Another woman, another child, another tragedy I could have prevented. I'm not your responsibility. You became my responsibility the moment you collapsed against my car." He said it with such finality that I knew arguing would be pointless. "I'm offering you security, Emma. Real security. A home that's maintained, bills that are paid, a future where you don't have to choose between feeding yourself and feeding your daughter. And what happens when you get bored?" The question came out bitter. "When you decide you've paid your debt to your mother's memory and you don't need us anymore? What happens to Lily then, when she's gotten used to having you around?" Something dark flashed across his face. "I don't abandon people I've claimed." Claimed. The word sent a chill through me. "I'm not property." "No." He stood, crossing the space between us in 2 strides, and suddenly he was crouching in front of me, his hands on the armrests of the couch, caging me in without touching me. "You're not property. You're under my protection. There's a difference. I don't understand the difference." "You will." His face was inches from mine, and I could see gold flecks in those dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Emma, I need you to understand something. The world I come from, it's not like yours. When I decide to protect something, I protect it completely. That means no one touches you, no one threatens you, no one makes you feel unsafe, ever. Why do you keep talking like someone's going to threaten me? I'm nobody. You're somebody to me." The words were simple, but they landed like a declaration, "and that makes you somebody to everyone in my world. Which means—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "Which means you need to be careful. There are people who might try to use you to get to me. Then maybe you should stay away." Even as I said it, I knew it was too late for that. Whatever this was between us, this strange, intense connection that made no logical sense, it had already taken root. "I can't." His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. "I've tried. For the last week, I tried to convince myself that I'd done enough, that I could walk away, make sure you had what you needed, and forget about you. But I can't forget. Every time I close my eyes, I see you collapsing in that parking lot. I see you alone in that house, fighting to survive. I see—" His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "I see you, Emma, and I can't unsee you." My breath caught. "This is crazy. We don't even know each other. Then let's get to know each other." He pulled back slightly, giving me space to breathe. "Have dinner with me. Tonight. Let me take you somewhere. Talk to you like a normal person instead of a man with an obsession. You just admitted you have an obsession." I did. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "At least I'm honest about it. I should have said no." Every rational part of my brain screamed that getting involved with Dante Moretti, a man who clearly operated in a world I didn't understand, who had people working for him who looked like they'd killed before, who spoke about protection and claiming like they were normal concepts, was a terrible idea. But when was the last time I'd done the rational thing? When was the last time anyone had looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting, like I was more than just another statistic of bad decisions and worse luck? "Where would we go?" I asked. And I knew by the flash of satisfaction in his eyes that he'd already won. "There's a restaurant in Denver, Italian. The owner is, let's say he's an old family friend. He'll close the restaurant for us, give us privacy." He stood, offering me his hand. "Say yes, Emma." I looked at his outstretched hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles, adorned with a ring that looked both expensive and ancient. If I took it, I knew instinctively that I'd be taking more than just a hand. I'd be accepting everything that came with it, the protection, the possessiveness, the danger that seemed to follow him like a shadow. But I was so tired of being alone, so tired of fighting every battle by myself, so tired of pretending I didn't need anyone. I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and secure, and he pulled me to my feet. "Good. We'll leave at 7. Marcus will pick you up. I don't have anything to wear. You will." He said it with the same confidence he said everything, like the universe rearranged itself to accommodate his will. "There will be options in your closet by this afternoon. You can't just—" "I can. I will." He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent heat racing through my veins. "Get used to it, Emma. I take care of what's mine. I'm not—" You are. He released my hand, but his eyes held me captive. You just don't know it yet. He left me there in the NICU, staring after him, my hand still tingling from his kiss, my mind reeling from the conversation. I looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her incubator, and whispered, "What have I gotten us into?" She didn't answer, of course, but I thought I saw the ghost of a smile on her tiny face. That afternoon, when Marcus drove me back to the house, I found my bedroom transformed. The closet, which had been empty except for the few threadbare clothes I owned, was now filled with dresses, slacks, sweaters, all in my size. On the bed lay 3 evening dresses, each more beautiful than the last, with a note in that sharp handwriting: "Choose whichever makes you feel powerful." I chose the black one. Simple, elegant, with a neckline that suggested without revealing. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Clean, healthy, dressed in clothes that fit and didn't have holes. I looked like someone worth noticing. I looked like someone Dante Moretti would take to dinner. Marcus arrived exactly at 7, and this time he spoke. "You look nice, Mrs. Hart. It's just Emma." "No, ma'am." He opened the car door. "Not anymore." The drive to Denver took an hour, the city lights growing brighter as we descended from the mountains. The restaurant was in an upscale district, all brick and glass and discreet elegance. True to Dante's word, it was closed. The private event sign in the window, the interior dark, except for candlelight. Dante waited inside, and when I entered, I forgot how to breathe. He'd changed into a different suit. Still dark, still expensive, but somehow less formal. His tie was gone, the top button of his shirt undone, and he looked at me with an expression that made my stomach flip. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "It's the dress. It's you." He crossed to me, offering his arm. "Come. I want to know everything about you." We sat at a table set for 2, candles flickering between us, and he poured wine, red, rich, probably worth more than my car. A chef appeared from the kitchen, older, Italian, with knowing eyes, and he and Dante spoke in rapid Italian before the man disappeared again. "He's going to make you something special," Dante explained. "I told him you needed feeding up. You told him I looked skinny. I told him you looked like you'd survived something terrible and deserved something beautiful." His eyes met mine across the table. "Now talk to me. Tell me about Emma Hart. Tell me how you ended up alone on a mountain, fighting for survival." So I did. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, someone actually listened. I told him everything. About my parents who valued reputation over their daughter, who threw me out when my pregnancy became visible enough to embarrass them at their country club. About Jake, the father, who promised me forever and disappeared with my savings the moment responsibility became real. About the friends who faded away when I could no longer afford to meet them for drinks, when my problems became too heavy for casual sympathy. Dante listened with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable, his dark eyes never leaving my face, his expression revealing nothing. When the food came, course after course of dishes I couldn't pronounce but that tasted like comfort made edible, he asked questions. Not invasive ones, but careful ones, like he was mapping the territory of my life, identifying the wound so he knew where not to press. "And your grandmother?" he asked as we shared tiramisu that melted on my tongue. "She died when I was 16. We weren't close. My mother always said she was difficult, impossible to please. But she left me the house in her will." I played with my fork, not meeting his eyes. I think she knew what my parents were like. I think she was trying to give me an escape route. Wise woman, stubborn woman. My mother always said I took after her. I finally looked up. That it wasn't a compliment. It is from me. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Stubbornness keeps you alive when everything else fails." "Is that how you survived?" I asked, emboldened by wine and the strange intimacy of the moment. "Whatever made you into this?" I gestured at him, at the closed restaurant, at the world he inhabited that I was only beginning to glimpse. His expression shuddered, and I thought I'd crossed a line, but then he spoke, his voice lower than before. My father was a violent man, powerful, respected, feared, but violent. He built his empire on other people's fear, and he ruled his family the same way. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. My mother tried to protect me from him. She took beatings meant for me, punishments meant for me, and when she got pregnant again, with my half-sister, she tried to leave him. What happened? He found her. He always found her. His jaw tightened. She went into labor while trying to run. Alone, terrified, bleeding. By the time someone found them, it was too late for both of them. My father... He stopped, something dark and terrible crossing his face. My father didn't even go to the funeral. He said she'd embarrassed him by trying to leave, that she got what she deserved. That's horrible. That's the world I come from. His eyes met mine, and they were full of old pain and harder truths. I was 7 years old, and I learned that day that power without mercy is just cruelty, that fear without respect is just tyranny. When my father died, when I took over what he'd built, I swore I would be different, harder than him where it mattered, but never cruel to those who couldn't fight back. Is that what I am to you? Someone who can't fight back? No. He turned my hand over, his fingers tracing my palm. You're someone who's been fighting alone for too long. There's a difference. The restaurant owner appeared then, speaking to Dante in Italian, and Dante responded in kind. Money changed hands. Far too much, I was certain. And the man bowed slightly before disappearing back into the kitchen. What did you tell him? I asked. That the food was excellent, that you enjoyed it, that he should expect us to return. He stood, offering his hand. Come, I want to show you something. We left the restaurant and walked through Denver's streets, Marcus following at a discreet distance. The city was alive with nightlife, bars spilling music onto sidewalks, couples walking hand in hand. The pulse of urban life that felt foreign after weeks of mountain isolation. Dante led me to a park overlooking the city, lights spreading out below us like captured stars. We stood at the railing, close but not touching, and I felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing between us. I need you to understand something, he said finally. The protection I'm offering, it comes with complications. There are people in my world who will see you as a weakness, as leverage, as something they can use to hurt me. Then why risk it? Because the alternative is worse. He turned to face me, and in the dim light, his features were all sharp angles and shadows. The alternative is walking away, pretending I never met you, and living with the knowledge that I could have helped and chose not to. I've lived with that kind of regret before. It eats you alive from the inside. So I'm what? Your redemption? Maybe. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Or maybe you're just someone I can't walk away from, no matter how much sense it would make to do so. His hand lingered on my face, and I felt myself leaning into the touch despite every warning bell in my head. Dante, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. I don't need you to be anything except yourself. His other hand came up, framing my face. Strong, stubborn, surviving against all odds. That's all I need. And when you realize I'm not worth all this trouble, that won't happen. How can you be sure? Because I've seen who you are. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. I've seen you choose to survive when it would have been easier to give up. I've seen you protect your daughter even when you had nothing. I've seen you refuse help even when you desperately needed it, because accepting would have meant admitting defeat. His thumb brushed my lower lip. You're exactly worth the trouble, Emma. You just don't know it yet. He kissed me then, softly at first, a question more than a demand. But when I responded, when I let myself lean into him and kiss him back, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became hungrier, and I felt his arms wrap around me, pulling me against him with a possessiveness that should have frightened me, but instead made me feel safe. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Come home with me tonight. I can't. Lily is in excellent hands at the hospital, and we're 20 minutes away if anything changes. I'm not asking you to abandon her. I'm asking you to let yourself have one night where you're not alone. His hands tightened on my waist. One night where someone takes care of you instead of the other way around. I should have said no. I should have insisted he take me back to the mountain, to the beautiful house he'd built for me, where I could be alone and safe and in control. But I was so tired of being in control, so tired of being the only one responsible for every decision, every outcome, every failure. One night, I whispered. His apartment was in one of Denver's most exclusive buildings, the kind with a doorman who nodded respectfully, and an elevator that required a key to access the penthouse. The space was exactly what I'd expected. Modern, minimalist, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a design magazine. But there were details that made it human. A bookshelf full of worn paperbacks, a photo on the side table of a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes. His mother, I realized. A half-finished chess game set up in the corner. "Drink?" he offered, moving to a bar cart. "Water." At his raised eyebrow, I added, "I'm still recovering, and technically still breastfeeding." Something softened in his expression. He poured water for me and whiskey for himself, and we sat on the couch overlooking the city. For a while, we just existed in comfortable silence, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. "What happens now?" I asked finally. "Now, you rest. Tomorrow, we bring Lily home. And then," he paused, "then we figure out how to make this work." "This? Us, you, me, Lily, a family." He said it like it was already decided, like the universe had no choice but to accommodate his vision. Families aren't built in a week, Dante. No, they're built in moments, in choices, in deciding that someone matters enough to fight for them. His hand tightened on my shoulder. "I'm choosing you, Emma. I'm choosing Lily. The question is, will you choose me?" I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The abandonment, the poverty, the desperate struggle for survival, the moment of collapse in a parking lot, and the stranger who stopped when everyone else would have walked past. The house transformed from ruin to haven. The way he looked at my daughter like she was precious. The way he looked at me like I was worth protecting. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you careful." He pressed a kiss to my temple, "But don't let it keep you alone." I stayed that night, sleeping in his bed with his arms around me. And for the first time in months, I felt safe enough to actually rest. When I woke in the morning, light streaming through those massive windows, I found him already awake, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Good morning," he murmured. "Hi." I felt suddenly shy, aware that I was in his bed, in his space, in his life. His phone buzzed, and he checked it, his expression changing. "The hospital called. Lily's ready to go home." "Really?" Joy and panic warred in my chest, but I thought, "Dr. Chen says she's exceeded all expectations. Strong, healthy, breathing on her own. She wants to go home." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually severe face. "So let's bring her home." The next few hours were a blur of hospital paperwork, instructions from nurses, and finally, being handed my daughter. Lily was dressed in a tiny outfit that Dante had somehow procured, and she looked up at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. "Hello, baby girl," I whispered. "Ready to see your home?" The drive up the mountain felt different this time. I sat in the back with Lily's car seat secured beside me, and Dante sat up front with Marcus. But he kept turning around to check on us, like he couldn't quite believe we were real. When we pulled up to the house, my house, our house, the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. Dante carried the car seat inside, and I followed, my heart in my throat. The house was warm, filled with soft lamplight and the smell of something cooking. Marcus must have prepared it while we were gone, starting a fire in the fireplace, making sure everything was perfect for Lily's homecoming. I carried her upstairs to the nursery, that perfect yellow room, and changed her diaper on the changing table, fed her in the rocking chair. Watching her tiny face as she ate, Dante appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching us with an expression of such fierce protectiveness that it took my breath away. "She's perfect," he said. "She is." I looked down at my daughter, This tiny person who had somehow survived against all odds, just like her mother. We both are. Thanks to you. No. He crossed the room, kneeling beside the rocking chair. You survived because you're strong. I just made sure you didn't have to be quite so strong alone anymore. He reached out, his finger touching Lily's tiny hand, and she gripped it with surprising strength. Hello, little one. I told you I'd make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. I meant it. Over the next weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Dante visited daily, sometimes for hours, sometimes just briefly between whatever mysterious business he conducted. He'd hold Lily while I showered, cook meals while I napped, sit with me in the evenings while we watched her sleep in her bassinet. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give, never demanded explanations or commitments, just showed up, day after day, proving through actions rather than words that he meant what he said. But I saw the other side too. The phone calls he took in another room, speaking in Italian with a voice like ice, the way Marcus and other men would sometimes appear, reporting things I didn't understand, and Dante's expression would become cold and terrible. The night he came to the house with bruised knuckles and blood on his shirt cuff, and when I asked what happened, he simply said, someone needed a reminder about respect. I should have been afraid, should have questioned what kind of man I'd let into my life, into my daughter's life, but I'd seen him at 3 a.m, rocking Lily when she wouldn't stop crying, singing Italian lullabies in a voice rough with exhaustion. I'd seen him sit for hours just watching her sleep, like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. I'd seen him look at me like I was something precious, something worth protecting at any cost. 3 months after that day in the parking lot, on an evening when snow fell soft outside, and Lily slept peacefully in her crib, Dante found me in the kitchen making tea. Marry me, he said without preamble. I nearly dropped the kettle. What? Marry me. He crossed the room, taking the kettle from my hands and setting it aside. Let me make this official. Let me give Lily my name, my protection. Real protection that doesn't end if something happens to me. Let me give you the security of knowing that no matter what, you'll both be taken care of. Dante, we've known each other 3 months. I knew after 3 minutes, his hands framed my face. I knew when you collapsed in that parking lot and looked at me with defiance instead of gratitude. I knew when you fought me on every bit of help, too proud to admit you needed it. I knew when I saw you with Lily, the way you love her fiercely, even though everything in your life had fallen apart. He kissed me softly. Marry me, Emma. Choose me the way I've chosen you. This is insane. Yes. You're dangerous. Yes. I don't even know what you really do. I know. He pressed his forehead to mine, and I'll tell you everything when you're ready to hear it. But it doesn't change what I'm asking. Marry me. Be mine. Let me be yours. I thought about the girl I'd been 3 months ago. Desperate. Alone. Terrified. I thought about the woman I was now. Still learning to accept help. Still learning that strength didn't mean doing everything alone. I thought about Lily upstairs, sleeping peacefully in a warm house, safe and healthy and loved. And I thought about the man in front of me, who'd seen me at my lowest, and decided I was worth saving, who'd rebuilt not just a house, but my faith that someone could choose to stay. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed me then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and I felt something in my chest finally unclench. I was choosing this, choosing him, choosing us. We married quietly 2 weeks later, just us and Marcus as witness, in the living room of the house he'd rebuilt. I wore a simple white dress, and Lily, awake for once, watched from Dante's arms as we said our vows. I promised to protect you, he said, sliding a ring onto my finger, platinum with diamonds that caught the light. To provide for you, to stand between you and anything that threatens you, to be the shield you never asked for but always needed. I promised to let you, I said, and his smile told me he understood what those words cost. To trust you, to build something real with you, to be the family you lost and found again. When he kissed me, sealing our vows, Lily made a small sound, not quite a cry, but a noise of recognition. Dante pulled back, looking down at her, and his expression was full of wonder. "Hello, daughter," he said softly. "Did you know that as of today, your name is Lily Moretti? And that means you're protected by everything I am, everything I have, everything I'll ever be?" She yawned, unimpressed by declarations, and we both laughed. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, Dante and I sat by the fire. His arm was around me, and I felt the solid weight of the ring on my finger, a symbol of promises made and kept. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping. That day in the parking lot, for not walking past like everyone else would have. Emma." He tilted my face up to look at him. "I would cross 1,000 parking lots, rebuild 1,000 houses, fight 1,000 wars, all to make sure you and Lily are safe. That's not something you thank me for. That's just what you do when you love someone." "You love me?" It was the first time either of us had said the words. Desperately, obsessively, probably unhealthily, by most standards. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "But yes, I love you. I think I loved you from the moment you looked at me like you didn't need saving, even though we both knew you did. I love you too." The words felt strange on my tongue, but also right. "Even though you're terrifying and possessive and probably involved in things I shouldn't ask about. Definitely don't ask about those things." "I won't." I settled against him, feeling safe and warm and impossibly lucky, as long as you promise to always come home. "Always," he said, and I believed him. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. But inside our house, the house that had been a frozen ruin and was now a haven of warmth, we had everything we needed. A home. A family. Each other. I'd been abandoned by everyone I thought I could count on. But in that abandonment, I'd found something better. A man who'd seen me at my worst and decided I was worth his best. A daughter who would grow up knowing she was protected, cherished, wanted. A life rebuilt from ruins into something beautiful. The Mafia Boss's wife, that's what I'd become. But more than that, I was Emma Moretti. Mother, survivor, and finally home. The fire crackled. Lily slept peacefully upstairs, and Dante's arms held me close as the mountain night deepened around us. This was my life now. Complicated, dangerous, unexpected, but mine. Ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.